questions, and etc. So I'm Dave Moore. I'm a local Drupal developer. I work at a large nonprofit, which you've probably never heard of in Newton. I do a lot of freelance with some other nonprofits. I'm a developer, first and foremost, I think, not a themer, but as I mentioned, I work at a nonprofit, so I do a little bit of everything and a lot of seat of the pants theming. So you're hearing about probably all the theming I know that I can talk confidently about. I can talk some more if later on, if we have time for questions, and we can talk a little bit more about some more sort of intermediate stuff, but this is definitely just the basics. And feel free to call my bluff if you actually do know this and you're just here checking your email. And I say something wrong, please tell me. Just real quick, who are you? Designers? Quick show of hands. What would you call it? If you had to put yourself in one box, what would it be? A designer? Front-end developer? Back-end developer? Drupal admin? Okay. And if you're a themer, you probably shouldn't be here, but again, you're welcome to stay. Just kind of curious. Looks like we have a little mix. Okay, so these are just the basic assumptions. God, that screen really is high. That you know a little bit. You might get lost if you don't know any of this stuff, if you know a little bit of this stuff. Just assuming that you actually have played around on Drupal on the admin side and are familiar with it and are now officially sick of Garland and all the other core themes. Maybe you actually have installed a contrib theme, which we're going to go over very briefly, but now you want to move beyond core themes. So that's basically what we're going to cover, and again, if we go through it pretty quickly, I can talk about sort of intermediate theming stuff. And these are the four main points, though. Anatomy of a theme. We will not be talking about the wacky doctors at Seattle Grace, unfortunately. All right, so you need a theme. And if you don't know this already, we're just going to go by quickly. The first place is the theming repository on Drupal.org. Find one you like. Make sure you have the right version. That's the most important thing. I'm assuming we're going to, if you're just starting out, you're already on Drupal 6. Make sure you don't get the Drupal 5 version. You download it and you put it in the right place. If you've never done this before, please do this. Don't do this on a live site that people are going to. Please try it out on your local host or a dev site first until you get really, really comfortable not only with the process and where the themes go, but also how to administer the theme and which themes work well with your site and things like that. So if you are, once you get comfortable with this process and you're putting themes up on a production site, always try them out first on a local site or a dev site. See if the theme itself is in the development version. That could raise some red flags. Check out the issue queue. Make sure that there's no sort of open issues that could cause problems on your site, things like that. Basically, same thing that you would do with a module. Just test drive it and check it out and see what other people say and whatnot. Okay, this is the number one gotcha when people first start out with Drupal and start playing with their themes. It's really seemingly counterintuitive, but don't take your new theme and put it in the /themes directory. Probably anyone who's actually been through this process has probably already been burned by this. It's much the same way when you download a contributed module, you don't put it in /modules. And that goes back to the fact that don't hack core, and you can read more about this on Drupal.org and everywhere else, but it goes back to the belief that there's a certain part of your Drupal site that you never touch. You just put it up there, you don't edit it, you shouldn't edit it, and that's called hacking core, and it's really bad, and God kills kittens when you do it, and all those things. Where exactly you should put it depends. It's kind of a little nebulous question because it depends if you're doing multi-site and things like this. But generally, if you're starting this out, you're doing it just on your local machine or on a dev site or at a URL that your people aren't coming to. It's just a site you can test out. If you create a directory called sites all /themes or sites default /themes, you should be fine. And once you put it there and you go back to your admin panel, you should see the contributed theme showing up. If it's not, you might have put it in the wrong place, or you might have gotten the wrong version or something like that. So it's really pretty simple. Really the hardest part of adding a contributed theme to your site the first time is knowing where to put it. And once you do, it's pretty straightforward. So that's how you do a contrib theme. But what if you don't like the contrib theme, or you're a designer and you want to learn how to take your graphics and CSS and HTML that you've created and how you develop your own theme? Well, as I see it, there's 5 ways you can do this, 5 main ways. And there's a little bit of overlap and whatnot. But we're going to just go through these, and again, assuming you've never done this before, and just sort of touch on these 5 main ways. I would suggest all 5 of these if you want to get like a full grasp of theming and how to create a theme. But they're sort of in order of complexity, I guess, again, broadly speaking. And let's just start there. So you can take a, did I skip one? Okay, yeah, no. Modify an existing theme. And this is drop-dead easy, doesn't require any code. And all you're doing is you're uploading a contributed theme, and depending on which theme it is, it could have certain settings and could have integration with a color module like Garland does. And you can, certainly in Drupal 6 now, there's a surprising level of customization. So if you really want to get that site out today, I would suggest finding a contrib theme you like that's flexible enough and is stable, and installing that and playing around with the various levels of customization. And you literally don't need to know anything. Don't need to touch any code, and you can, yeah.
David, I bought a theme from templatemonster.com.
Okay.
That's a Drupal theme. I mean, it's not contributed as in your definition of contributor. Any comment on those kind of themes? I can do the same thing with them too? Yeah,
you should be able to. I've heard good and mixed reviews of precisely of Template Monster, but I pointed you just to the template, the theme director, the theme repository, that's what I'm trying to say, the theme repository on Drupal, because they're free, and there's a wide variety, and part of the whole emphasis here is that there's not enough wide variety, but yeah.
So the theme has to be designed for color module to work with it. Not all themes will work with color
Correct. Module. And again, it's got to have a special integration and code in the theme that allows to integrate with the color module. But if you haven't done this, this is the first step. This is very basic, but you should know how to do it. And if you're developing your own themes, you should know how to do it in case you want to write a theme that integrates color module, all the great new theme setting options you have in Drupal 6, things like that. So again, this is the easiest thing to do. You should know it, and again, yeah?
I want to say, sometimes it seems like the easiest thing to do, but
okay.
I don't recall it the easiest thing to do, because oftentimes you're dealing with other people's code implementations and things, and I think there's a really strong case we made for doing it from scratch, or modifying, a Zen or a foundation or something, is more the easiest way to do it.
Right, yeah, I would...
Some stuff there to really confuse you at first.
Right, I would say it's the fastest.
I'm going to say it's not. I'm going to say for whatever you're going to say, I'm going to say it can be the fastest. It can be the easiest, but I'm not comfortable with saying it is the fastest and it is the easiest. I think it really depends on.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we had a race right now, and I said, change the theme, change your theme from Garland, and you had to write something from scratch, and I just downloaded a contrib file and changed some colors, then I mean that would be. I'm not saying it's recommended. I'm just saying. Yeah. I mean, 99% of the time, if you're working for a client, they're not, you could say, hey, if you want to do this really, really cheap, pick a template, pick a theme from the repository, and we could change some colors and move some blocks around and that's it. But usually clients are a little more demanding than that. So, but I mean, it's something you should know if you're working on theming. So the starter theme approach. Take a look at basic, and these are all names of themes. Foundation, Mosh Pit, which I just found out about yesterday. There's also the grid-based themes, 9, 16, Blueprint. And all of these can be found at drupal.org/project, and then just insert the name there. There's plenty more. These are just the names that could fit on the slide. Great learning experience. And what a starter theme is, basically, is just a very, very stripped down, lightweight theme. If once you install a starter theme, you're going to say, wow, this sucks. Nothing's going on. But the thing is, it does enough of the groundwork for you to start building on top of it and start adding your own CSS and adding your own customization. It's a great learning experience. I'd recommend it. If you already have a static site where you have your HTML and your CSS and also your JavaScript. I'm not going to talk a lot about JavaScript today. And you want to turn your static site into a Drupal theme, then this is a good way to learn the ropes. You can also, if you still want to learn theming but you don't have anything to start with, go to OSWD and just download what they call a template from there, which is just a simple, it's HTML and CSS. And I'll have some links at the end, or by the end of today I'll have some links. There's some great screencasts that people have done, and they've actually gone on the screencast, picked a random OSWD template, downloaded it, taken a starter theme and combined the two in 20 minutes to show you exactly how to do it. It's surprisingly easy, and when we get to the anatomy of the theme, I'll point you in the right direction on how to do that.
David, one question.
Yeah.
You did mention Zen theme.
I did not. I intentionally didn't mention Zen theme because we're going to talk about it in a couple slides.
Okay.
And
if that's not a starter theme?
It is a starter theme. I'm not sure. I probably would pick one of these ones because Zen is, it's also the #1 sub-themable theme, which we're going to talk about in 2 slides. I could see, if you've never looked at a theme before, I'm not sure I would start with Zen, just because there's so much documentation, and there's the starter kit and the classic, and it's like 1/3 of a megabyte. It's a very large and complex thing. It's very powerful. You can use it as a starter theme, but I wouldn't use it as your first ever starter theme. But good question. I was wondering if someone was going to call me on that. Gut a full theme. I call this the burning to the ground method, which is the way I used to do things. I'm not sure I'd recommend it anymore, and that's just basically taking any theme. Yep.
Another great starter theme I have found out is the framework.
Yeah.
Framework?
Yeah.
Just framework? Okay, great. Yeah.
It's a great theme to start with.
Yeah,
Cool.
It's really clean and well laid out. It's good.
All right. I actually, this is how infrequently I do theming, I should say. On that previous slide, one of my recommendations was Hunchback, which I used many times, and then found out yesterday that there's not really a Drupal 6 version of it. Hunchback actually, from what I read, the remains of Hunchback turned into Studio and Canvas, and things took a very different turn in Drupal 6. So if you are still in Drupal 5, which you shouldn't be, Hunchback is another one I really like. So burning to the ground, you just take anything basically that you like, gut it, take the theme and start removing stuff, and then start adding your own stuff. And it's as chaotic and sloppy, it can be as chaotic and sloppy as it sounds. I wouldn't recommend it, but I would recommend it if you're doing theming, because the more themes you look at, the more you learn. It's just, you have to do it carefully and consult other sources on Drupal.org so you're not picking up bad habits. For the longest, one thing you hear time and time again is how Garland is the default core theme, but up until very recently, Garland also had a lot of bad habits, which is a little more advanced than this talk. But it's a good learning experience, but one of the disadvantages is if you don't know enough about theming, you might start seeing things in themes and start thinking, oh, this is how this is done, when it might not be the best practice. That's the same thing for module development as well, though. You know, there's 4,000 contrib modules. If you download it, and just because it works doesn't mean it's written well, and doesn't mean that they're using good practices. Yeah.
So is there a list of full themes that are well constructed?
I can't think one off the top of my head. Anyone?
Adaptive things?
Yeah?
Adaptive things has a series of them that are pretty well secured.
Yeah? Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Which one was that? I didn't know.
Adaptive themes?
Adaptive?
Yeah, I think it's adaptivethemes.com.
I heard this top-notch, like they have Aquamarine.
Yeah, top-notch. Any of the top-notch themes are very well documented and very well put together.
I think their Aqua Maria that comes with the
Yep.
core,
Yep.
I'm told is very well written.
Yep. Okay, now sub-theming, which is very cool, very powerful. It is definitely the wave of the future, and the future is here. The future is now. Is that Joe Strummer? Lots of people, sub-theming really took off with Drupal 6. It's almost the de facto way to do a really good professional theme, I think, these days. I'm hearing more and more professional design houses and professional themers doing sub-theming and nothing but sub-theming, and only sub-theming off one certain theme. How does it work? If there's any programmers here, it's kind of like object-oriented programming, kind of, sort of, in that you take a theme. In this case, we'll say Zen, because that's probably the most popular sub-theme theme. Take a theme called Zen. Then we create another theme. So you load up Zen, but you don't really do anything with it except keep it in your themes directory. Then you create your own theme called whatever you want to call it. We'll call it Sunday. And you put one little line in your info file, which we'll talk about in a second. And declare the base theme, basically the parent, saying, use everything in Zen and have it inherit everything from Zen unless I override it. It's a little complicated and we're not going to get too far into it, but you can read more about it in any of the resources. But the setup is non-trivial because it takes a little bit more. You declare that in your info file, but then you have to do other things to overwrite the CSS and overwrite some of the more complex things in the theme. So it's not trivial. The great thing about it is someone's already done the heavy lifting. You know, Zen is, this might get back to our debate about which is fastest, but you can make a original looking theme sub-theming off Zen in an afternoon. You know, if you know what you're doing. It really is quite quick, and a lot of the stuff is all set. And they were handing out the cards earlier of how to theme with Zen, and it's pretty amazing. It's just you just have to know exactly what to tweak and exactly what setting to do, and suddenly you've got this, you know, really nice looking 3-column, blog in no time at all. And also, the great thing about sub-theming is when Zen gets upgraded, all you do is upgrade Zen, and you've got the power of the community, everyone working on Zen. Whereas if you create your own theme from scratch, that's you working on it and no one else. Yeah?
So, just to be clear, let's say like you said, use Zen as a reference. It's not really reference, it's connected to the theme you have built. It's just that.
Right, yeah. It basically what Drupal, when you put that one line in your info file, Drupal now says, okay, if you don't have this CSS file, then I'm going to grab it from Zen. If you don't have this, I'm going to grab it from Zen. So a Zen subtheme sometimes can be very, very minimal. I mean, you know, a couple hundred lines of CSS and not much more, but look completely different from Zen.
But when you upgrade it, it's changing, it's not going to touch the info changes you made. And it's
because your subtheme is completely, it used to be a subtheme had to be within your
So it's a
With,
separate.
yeah, it's separate. That used to be a problem with sub-theming, is when you updated your parent theme and you didn't do it carefully enough, you'd overwrite your sub-theme. But that's no longer a problem. And so you just update Zen, you don't touch your theme. And then start from scratch. So this might be your ultimate goal. These days it probably isn't. And all that means is this is what you do when you really know all your theming, basically. And even the pros, like I said, don't even do this all the time. They'll sub-theme off Zen or some other one, or they have an internal starting kit, you know, sort of an in-house collection of CSS and template files that they start from. You know, if you're a professional themer, you're smart enough to know not to reinvent the wheel. And you'll also, again, it's open source, so you'll also be looking around and stealing things that you really like from other themes and collecting them in your own sort of toolkit. So, those are the, 5 basic ways. Now we're getting on to anatomy. So, namespace. This is kind of overlooked, but it's kind of an important thing. And the chances of you having a namespace collision are small, but if you don't give it just a little bit of thought, you could spend a day or two trying to figure out why your theme isn't working. So find a unique namespace, and all that is your, the namespace for Zen is Zen, the namespace for Garland is Garland. That's just that simple. It's the name of the directory in which you're going to put your theme. That's it in a nutshell, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. It can't conflict with a theme name and this is another big gotcha, or a module name. So if you're designing if you really like a module, or you've written your own module, and you also have a theme that connects to it, it still needs to be a different name, or else you could quickly run into this all goes back to PHP, and it doesn't have namespaces and blah blah blah. But if you don't do that, you could have a function defined twice, and you get a white screen of death, and it'll be bad news. So I actually, preferably no underscores. That's kind of a little bit of a debate going on right now, but just keep it to one word, keep it simple, keep it short so you don't have to type a lot every time you use the namespace. It's that simple. I actually find this to be one of the more fun things to do. I often do it too often, but celebrity kid names, middle names, places, Scottish islands, whatever you like, as long as it's unique. And keep an eye on when you do give it a name. Make sure there's not an existing mod, especially if you're doing it for a client. It's not an existing theme or module name in the repository, because that would cause problems as well. So the more unique, the better. So the first piece of your theme when you're creating it, and again, I wouldn't, if I were you, I'm starting from scratch and you've never done theme work before, you're probably going to want to go out and create your first theme, but look at a bunch of themes first, which we're going to do right now, actually. So the .info file, and the name of that is just whatever the namespace is, .info. It's a simple little text file, but it's very powerful. It has very specific syntax, and it tells Drupal about the theme's metadata in a nutshell. It's like an ini file if you're a programmer, just a simple little list of metadata. This URL right here is very useful, and it's going to tell you everything you need to know. And I actually, every time I create an info file, I go back to it because the syntax is a little weird. But that's it. So if we had, what did I call it, Sunday? So if I would create a theme called Sunday, I would create a directory called Sunday. I would put it wherever I keep all the rest of my themes. And the first thing I'd do is create just a text file called sunday.info. And I would populate it. Are we going to take a look? Yeah, okay, so this is from Basic. Can you all see that? Yeah, enough? So this is from, should have been a slide at the beginning, I don't know what happened to it. So this is from the Basic theme. If you have an internet connection and want to download it and follow along, but you can look at it afterwards. And some of this will probably make sense. The name is actually different from the namespace. That actually you can have spaces in it and stuff. But barring that, I'd probably just use the namespace. There's a description, a simple description, the screenshot. If you go to the themes page, that'll show you, all your different, it'll give you a simple screenshot of the themes, so they're easier to choose, and you say, oh, that's the theme I want. Engine, we're not going to talk about engines today, defines the regions, and again, assuming you've played around with Drupal a little bit, you know what regions are and how you put blocks in regions. Features are just sort of the basic stuff. Again, when you do basic theme administration, you can, whether or not it's going to have a logo, a name, a mission. Not a lot of people realize this, but those are totally optional. If you're designing it for a client and you know they don't have a mission and a slogan, don't include those, or else they're going to say, hey, I'm going to type in a mission, but it's never going to get printed on the theme. So, and then they'll call you up and say, hey, what's going on? There's actually a little bit, this is almost the whole info file. I took away some of the scary packaging script stuff. Semicolon just means a comment. This is really important. This is where you include the style sheets. And this just basically, again, this is just metadata. And so this is telling Drupal, hey, these are the style sheets I'm going to be using on any given occasion. And this, you can see, this just means include for print, and it's a little more complicated than that. And these are some basic settings. This is new in Drupal 6. Yeah?
So one thing I'm always thinking, there's never any reason to use the brackets following the media declaration in style sheets.
Really?
I'm asking, I've never seen it used ever. They're just always.
Oh yeah, I guess this is. I guess if someone adds a different print style sheet beforehand, it's kind of like the last comma in an array or something. You don't really need it, but it's just a precaution in case someone up here adds style sheets print. Won't overwrite it. It'll just add another one. It's highly unlikely given this is the whole file, but I would think that's the reason. It might be best practice, but again, on that link I showed you earlier, they should tell you. So CSS files. If you're here, you probably at least know what CSS is or are an expert in CSS. You're familiar with it. Interesting thing about CSS is, of all the stuff we're going to talk about today, this doesn't need to be Drupalized. So if you have existing CSS, that's fine. You don't need to add any funky little characters to the top to say this is a Drupal CSS sheet. It's just plain old CSS. And it can be named anything and live anywhere in the theme name, which is just Sunday, we'll call it Sunday, can live anywhere in the Sunday directory. So if you have a lot of CSS and want to organize your theme, you can create a CSS directory inside Sunday and put all your CSS there. As you just saw in the info file, the only thing be sure to add them in the info. There we go. All right. When you do create the info file, when you do create your CSS or create a new CSS or you just have one sheet, the only thing you've got to do is, as we just saw in the info file, tell Drupal, hey, this is the CSS I'm using. Beware. So when you do first set up your first theme and you've got all your nice, neat CSS, you've tried it out in a static site or whatever, and you're all excited, and you load it up, and things just don't look like they did on the static site, it might be because, by default, core and also some of the contrib modules you're using add extra CSS. So keep that in mind. Obviously, just look at the source, see what your CSS is. If you don't use Firebug, I don't know how you get through the day. I can't imagine life before Firebug, but I guess we did manage. It's the very similar scenario for JavaScript. I said we weren't going to talk much about JavaScript, but it's the same thing. It's actually a little more complicated because your JavaScript should be in jQuery, and that's well beyond the scope of this. But if you do want to include just plain old JavaScript, it's a very similar scenario. You don't have to Drupalize it, but hopefully your JavaScript is jQuery, and I didn't want to get into that. So page.tpl.php, this is the biggie. You do need an info file, or else Drupal won't pick up your theme and won't interpret it. But this is where the magic happens. It's I'm looking at just the top part of this, and if you've done any kind of templating in any other kind of system, this is probably looking familiar. If all you are is a front-end HTML, CSS person, and you've never done any templating, this kind of looks familiar. And it probably, hopefully, isn't too scary. But basically all this is the page.tpl.php file is the main piece. Anytime you look at it, well, I'm not going to say anytime, almost anytime you look at a Drupal page, it's taking, in your theme, in your Sunday theme, it's taking that at the last minute, basically, and saying, okay, I'm going to print the doc type like you would. I'm going to print HTML element. I'm going to print the head. I'm going to print the title. And this obviously is where the whole power of the CMS comes in. And hopefully you know at least a little PHP. It stops and says, hold on a second, what's the title of this page? And prints this in. And if I'm assuming we're all kind of familiar with the power of the database-driven website, but this is really where you see it happening, and it comes to the fore. You just need one file to create, you need one basic template to create almost every page on your site. And anytime you see the PHP, it's just stopping and inserting variables. And if you don't know any PHP, the good news is that to get a lot of stuff done, a lot of simple to intermediate stuff done in Drupal theming, you really don't need to know. You need to know enough PHP to get by. Echo, I wish Basic didn't use Echo. Echo just means print, basically. They're essentially the same PHP functions. There is a little bit of a difference. You could just as easily say print. Makes a lot more sense to people in the design world. And this is just the head. You've got your IE junk for CSS. Print scripts just prints out all the associated JavaScripts. Let's look a little bit more. And this is another little piece of page.tpl.php. This is going to make more sense to front-end designers. You're basically saying, and again, I'm assuming you know what regions are and everything like that. So when you, on the Drupal admin side, when you define a region on a page and say, there's going to be a left sidebar and the following blocks are going to be in this left sidebar, this just says, in this particular instance, for this page you're looking at now, has anything been defined in the left sidebar? And usually there's a menu and a login and whatnot. So it checks, that's just a truth statement. It says, if there is something there, then print the div with the ID and the classes that Morton likes so much, and then another div with inner, and then print the actual, just print the blocks. The print left just means anything for this page that has been defined in the left sidebar, print them in the order. And then close, and that's just an end if. This is about as complicated as PHP logic gets in a well-written theme. Yeah?
This is actually back before.
Yeah.
Just on this styles, when it's printing $1 styles.
Yeah.
Where is that coming from if it's not coming from, like, say, the info file? Let's say you don't have any styles in your info file. And not the module styles, but it's actually calling themes slash, your theme slash
right.
style. Where is styles getting that from? And how do you tell that from working?
How do you
find if you have dollar styles, the dollar styles arrays, including some style sheets that you can't, like where are they coming from? If you turn them all off in your info file, you're like, well, okay,
well, it'll still grab unless you specifically overwrite like the core ones. It'll still grab the core ones and the module ones.
The core ones.
Yeah.
Now with style CSS be a core one, is that just the standard namespace for a core?
No, I'm style.css. That could be.
The question is, how do you find where it's coming from? In other words, like random style sheets included that are overwriting your styles, especially since in the case I'm referring to, it's appending to the end, following all the module styles.
Right.
It's random style sheets. Like, well, where's this coming from? It's overriding.
Well, I mean, if you look at the final HTML, you should be able to like locate where the style sheet is. Is that the question?
I can blow off the style sheet, but it would be it'd still be nice to know why it's calling. I mean, that's kind of a hack to say, okay, I'm just going to go to the file that Drupal's calling and delete it.
No, I'm not saying delete it.
I mean, because all it's telling you is where it's living in the file system.
Right.
Exactly. And then a related question is it possible that has to do with caching, and are you going to cover at some point the kind of question F that comes up on the end of your style sheets? You see that in
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not going to cover that. I just found out the other day, and I still kind of don't understand. Don't be alarmed if when you look at the final HTML, you see your style sheet and then a question mark and then a letter. It's a caching thing. It's not any kind of error or hack or anything. So this is as complex in a well-written theme as much PHP as you need to know. And you could probably learn this in an afternoon, basically. It's very simple, the basic setup of a well put together theme. It keeps any kind of complicated PHP out of that main page, out of the page.tpl.php file, and just says, does it exist? If so, print it. Does this exist? If so, print it. You know, sometimes you're wrapping it in some HTML, but that's about the level of complexity. Again, if you go to basic and look at the whole thing, if you know your HTML, if you can kind of make your way around conditional statements in PHP, it should make sense. There shouldn't be anything too complex there. And this is the most important thing on your page.tpl.php file. After you've printed your blocks inside your regions and you've done all your head stuff and you've closed everything, right in the middle of page.tpl.php, you want your content, right? You want to see you've created a new node on that page. You want to see the content of that node. And this is what happens when you print content, okay? All that means is content is printing out. 90% of the time it's just a node. It's the node, the meat of the node. You know, obviously sometimes it's a view, and we're not going to get into that, or a contact page or whatnot. But that's really the most important part. Yeah?
You know, all these variable names, content and other, they're pretty much standardized, right? Yeah, we're going to get to that. This is actually, again, I don't want to talk about engines or anything, but and I'll include some links. I'll make sure you get some links to many of these variables are already defined. There's ways you can add more variables and whatnot, but your standard template engine is going to create a lot of these variables for you. You don't have to, and let me show you the node tipple, and that might help. Right, on the same lines, one could say that this page tpl.php is pretty much defined for you already if you pick a theme.
Yeah.
And then you change it, but this will not be changing a whole lot unless you define new stuff. I don't know.
Right, you're right, yeah. I mean, there's interesting things you can do in the page.tpl file, but basically what the main point of it is to say, I want this region here, I want this region here, I want this region here, and then right in the middle, I want the content. You can do lots of neat stuff with it, but for your first theme, you're probably, chances are, the first theme you create, and this is what a lot of people do, is I just copy it and steal someone else's page tipple. Node is a little more complex, and this is the same thing when we print content, and the content happens to be a node, which it is more often than not. Drupal says, okay, it's a node. I'm printing content, and then it goes to this different file. And again, this is most of node.tipl.php from the basic theme. It goes here and says, okay, I want to look at the meat of the matter. And you can see this is where things get a little confusing, because we see our old friend $content again. All that just means is basically, in a nutshell, it just means the body and all the other fields you've defined in the node put together. So I did this before at work, and people just got really confused. And it is a little confusing, but it just means content changes. The variable changes depending on context, which is just sort of normal sort of programming behavior anyway. So I can see how, if you're not used to coding, it could be a little confusing. But you can see it's the same kind of simple PHP. If there's a picture, which no one ever uses, submitted is just the submitted data. So depending how you've set that up on your theme, it'll say, whether, depending on how you set up the date and the username and whatnot, that's just all one long string submitted. The first thing people want to do is change that. You can change it a little bit in the admin screen, or you can change it a heck of a lot at the theme layer, but that's definitely moving from basic to intermediate. Terms is if you were using taxonomy, that'll just spit out the terms. Links, that's just to read more and other little things that you see at the end. But is this making sense? Is this? Yeah.
Just a comment. Is it fair to assume that page is more of a presentation side of the output? Node is more content side of the output?
Yeah, that's yeah. There's definitely overlap.
There is some, but
yeah.
at a high level.
Yeah, this is, page just says, what does the page look like except for that stuff in the middle?
Right.
Which it then passes, unless it's a view or something else, which it then goes to this to say, what's that stuff in the middle? How does it look? And the first thing you want to do if you're getting used to theming is take someone else's theme, don't change the name or anything, and just play around with it on a test site. And you'll probably get a few white screen of deaths if you're not familiar with PHP enough. But take these 3 lines and move them up to the very top, and suddenly your content looks silly, but at least you know how to move around, and your submitted is below the content, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but you can do all sorts of stuff like that. That's my #1 recommendation if you've never done theming. Set up a test site, grab basic or anyone's theme, any contributed theme, and just start hacking away at it, save the file, refresh. In Drupal 6, there's some caching issues. Is that it? That is it. Thought there was more. Nope. Yeah, that's it. So, questions? More questions? Yeah?
Do you have some kind of conditional for node type? Like if you have content type and then you want a specific node TPL file?
Yep. That's that. If there was another hour, that would be the very next thing we'd lead into, which is node.temple.php. That if you only have that, all your nodes, depending on regardless of the content type and everything, they're all going to be printed out that way. So the first thing you're going to want to do, if you have a node called article, well, that's not very interesting. If you have a node called press release, all right, and you would say, all one word thing, hopefully. You would create a file, you would copy this, your node thing, your node temple.php. You would rename it press release node tpl.php, okay? And if you just did that, nothing would change. It would call the press release file when looking at a press release node. But because the code is the same, it would reproduce the same thing. But the first thing you would want to do maybe is put some, there we go. Oh. Better than climbing up a chair. So the first thing you might want to do is hard code some text right here that says, here's our here's our press relations person, okay? And you put it right up here. And that way, any node that's not a press release doesn't have that. Any node that is a press release gets that hard coded up top. That would be the first thing. The next thing people want to do is change these variables like submitted, which is, once you get the hang of it, pretty easy, but it involves going in the template.php file and knowing a bit more PHP than just if-then statements and things and print statements. But yeah, that's a great question. That's the first thing. And if you look at the theming resources on Drupal.org, you'll see that there's this whole kind of mysterious, but once you get the hang of it, not so mysterious naming conventions that just by naming files, like I just said, press release -node.temple.php, just by copying files and then renaming them, you can really modify your theme and tie it into the content pretty easily.
Does that first name have to match up with your content type name?
Absolutely, yeah. It has to match it exactly.
Okay.
So if it's press underscore release, then it's got to be, what's that?
It automatically picks it up, you don't have to do the info?
Yeah. You, on 6, you probably need to clear the cache. There's the whole theming registry and stuff like that, which is another big gotcha. But, yeah. More questions?
What are the best books if you had to buy a book?
If I had to buy a book, I would actually pick up and I knew someone was going to ask this. There's the Pact book, P-A-C-K-T, that's the publisher, Drupal 6 Themes. It's good. I have issues with the Pact books, but this one, if you're just starting out, I would definitely recommend. It goes through, by the time I got it, I thought, I know all this stuff. This is kind of like remedial, but it's yeah, if I were starting out, I wish that had been around when I first started theming. It would have saved me a lot of hassle. There's also the new one out by Constantine Front End Drupal, which I bought. I read a couple chapters. It's very cool. It's more like a cookbook, basically. That would be the second book I'd read, where you know the basics, and now you're like, you want to pick up little tips. And that has some really cool sort of tricks, but it definitely is sort of intermediate theming. The first couple chapters are good, but are useful, but you really need to know the theming basics before you start diving into that stuff.
So do you have a PHP book that you like as well?
Yeah, actually, I would, if you're already a programmer, I would recommend a couple books. The Zen to Study Guide, if you're taking the PHP certification, is really good, but it is geared towards people that are already into programming. Any of the O'Reilly books, Learning PHP 5.
I'll put a plug into for lynda.com.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
It's so
So
good.
they actually have a whole, I mean, I don't know if any of you have ever gone there for the resources, but they offer, you could get a $25 a month subscription, and they have a lot of these sort of video screencasts that they archive that you follow. They actually have one for Drupal 6, but they do have them for PHP and CSS, advanced CSS. So, and for more money, you can actually get access to exercise files to download to follow along.
Yeah, I definitely second that, because watching the CSS there and watching that whole Drupal series is so good.
Yeah.
What's it called?
It's lynda.com.
It's Lynda.com.
Yeah. The good thing about PHP is there's 10 times as many PHP books than there are Drupal books.
They
And
have
there's,
a great PHP series too.
Do they? Yeah.
Their CSS ones are so helpful for theming, just nails it.
Another great resource I like, just for sometimes when you forget or want to look up, is W3 Schools. If you just do a search for that, it's W3 Schools. They walk you through, I mean, it's just a great, easy look up for all different areas.
yeah, the funny thing about PHP is that if you're a professional programmer, everyone makes fun of PHP because it does, at the higher level, it's bad. If you're already a programmer in Python or Java or anything and you look at PHP, you're like, how do they name these functions? This is so silly. But the good thing is if you get into theming, you never really have to touch that stuff for the most part. You can just learn the basics: print, if, else. That's about, those are the basics. So you don't have to learn what a bad language PHP is. Anything else? So hopefully by the end of today, that's my website. I'm going to have a list of links. There's also a contact form if you have any follow-up question. I have 60 followers on Twitter. So get to be number 61. And thanks, I appreciate it. There's a lot more people than I thought it was going to be.
And I have a couple announcements for this afternoon's schedule.